Most folks assume a bigger garden bed means a bigger harvest. And for most plants, that's true. But here's the thing. There are 15 vegetables where a cheap pot on your patio actually beats open ground. And I'll show you the proof in the first 15 seconds. Take Mediterranean herbs like rosemary. Plant them in a soggy garden bed and the roots rot from the inside out. Drop them in a $5 terracotta pot with gritty soil and they thrive for years. That's a dirt-cheap $5 fix doing what a $50 raised bed couldn't. That's the real power of a container control. Control over drainage, temperature, pests, and root growth. And for plant number 1 today, control over something that could take over your whole garden if you get it wrong. Stay until the end. Because plant number 1 is the most common kitchen herb in the world. And it's a quiet nightmare the moment it touches open soil. Let's count down. Every plant on this list earns its spot for one specific scientific reason. One mechanism where a container beats open ground. We've mapped 15 vegetables across 5 mechanisms: drainage, control, soil warmth, root restriction, mobility to beat bolting, and pest and invasion isolation. No plant repeats the same reason twice, and our top 3, they've got peer-reviewed laboratory data behind them, not gardening forum opinions. There's an old gardener's saying, keep your mint in a pot unless you want a mint yard instead of a lawn. Turns out Grandma was right, and modern university extension officers now back her up. We'll get to exactly why at number 1. Let's start the countdown. Number 15, Mediterranean herbs, rosemary and thyme. These two hate wet feet. Plant them in regular garden soil and the first rainy week will begin rotting their roots from the inside out. Drop them in a 10-inch terracotta pot with gritty, well-draining mix and they thrive for years. Terracotta breathes. It pulls excess moisture away from the root zone before it builds up. If you want fresh rosemary and thyme every single day without babysitting a garden bed, this is your starting point. Number 14. Basil. Basil is the fastest plant on this list to punish you for bad drainage. Soggy roots mean stem rot in under a week. In a 6-inch terracotta pot on a south-facing windowsill, it becomes a pinch and grow machine all season long. No tools needed, just pinch and grow. The ASPCA classifies basil as non-toxic to dogs and cats. Who it's for? Anyone who wants fresh basil every day and has a sunny window. Number 13. Peas. Peas are highly sensitive to waterlogged soil. When the soil stays saturated, oxygen depletes around the root zone and peas simply stop producing. In a container with fast-draining potting mix, that risk disappears entirely. They also grow straight up, making them perfect for a balcony trellis. Who it's for? Anyone with vertical space and no room for a ground bed. Number 12. Radishes. Radish seeds want soil at around 85 degrees Fahrenheit to germinate quickly. In early spring, ground soil is cold and slow. In a dark-colored container sitting in direct sunlight, soil temperature rises 3 to 4 weeks faster than the ground. That means your first harvest of the season arrives while your neighbors are still waiting for their beds to wake up. Number 11. Bush cucumbers. Cucumbers need soil between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit to really thrive. Containers hit that temperature faster and hold it longer. One honest warning: in hot weather, a 5-gallon pot can dry out fast, often needing a deep soak once or even twice a day. If you travel a lot, these aren't your plant. But if you're home all summer, that same 5-gallon container will produce consistently all season long. Minor open loop. The next plant has the shallowest root system on this entire list. And that's exactly what makes it fail in the ground. Number 10. Lettuce. Lettuce roots go only 6 to 8 inches deep. In the ground, those shallow roots compete with every weed in the bed and usually lose. In a container, there are no weeds, zero competition. And here's the move most ground growers never get to use. When temperatures climb above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, you simply pick up the pot and move it into morning shade. That single move delays bolting by 2 to 4 weeks. More leaves, less bitterness. No garden bed can do that. Number 9. Spinach. Spinach bolts fast when heat and long days hit together. In the ground, you're committed, wherever you planted it. In a pot, you move it. East-facing exposure in the morning, shade by afternoon. The same variety that bolts in 3 weeks during a May heatwave can keep producing for weeks longer in a movable container that dodges the worst afternoon heat. The ASPCA classifies spinach as non-toxic to dogs and cats. Number 8. Swiss chard. Swiss chard's container advantage is temperature mobility in 2 directions. Move it into full sun to prevent the pale, stretched-out growth you get from too much shade. Move it back under cover when an unexpected frost threatens to trigger bolting. A container gives you 2-way temperature control that a garden bed simply cannot offer. Number 7. Green onions. Green onions have shallow roots, only 6 to 9 inches deep, and they compete poorly against weeds in open soil. In a container, they're completely isolated. One important warning for pet owners: the ASPCA lists green onions as highly toxic to both dogs and cats. N-propyl disulfide in alliums attacks red blood cells. If you have pets at home, keep this container elevated or behind a barrier. Number 6. Strawberries. In the ground, strawberries battle gophers, nematodes, and black root rot all season. In a hanging basket or an 8-inch container, none of those reach them. You harvest at chest height, no bending required. Iowa State University Extension confirms that an 8-inch container depth is enough to produce full-size fruit. The ASPCA classifies strawberries as non-toxic to dogs and cats. This is hands down the most elder-friendly container crop on this entire list. Number 5. Carrots. When a carrot root hits a rock, a clump of clay, or a pythium-infected patch of soil, it forks. It twists. It splits into 2. That's not bad genetics. That's mechanical impedance. According to WSU Extension, straight, clean carrots require loose, unobstructed growing medium. A 12-inch deep container with a soilless potting mix eliminates every single one of those obstacles. No rocks, no clay, no pythium. Just straight carrots every time. Number 4. Potatoes. Air pruning fabric bags stimulate dense fibrous root networks which can significantly increase potato yield. Here's the honest assessment. A 10 to 15 gallon fabric bag full of wet soil can weigh 30 to 50 kilograms. The hilling process, adding soil in layers as the plant grows, requires repeated lifting. This is not a beginner container crop, and it's not ideal for gardeners with limited strength or mobility. Green leaves and stems contain solanine, which is toxic to dogs and cats. If you're an experienced container gardener who can manage the weight, potatoes in fabric bags are genuinely rewarding. Everyone else, save your energy for the top 3. Before we hit the top 3, here are the 3 mistakes that sink most container gardeners. Don't panic. Every one of them is easy to dodge once you know it. Mistake 1. A pot with no drainage holes. A pretty pot with a sealed bottom drowns roots faster than any garden bed. If the water can't escape the roots, rot. Every container on this list needs holes in the bottom. Non-negotiable. Mistake 2. A pot that's too small. Herbs forgive a tight pot. Tomatoes and peppers don't. Undersize the container and you starve the plant mid-season. Match the pot to the crop. We'll hand you the exact sizes in the top 3. Mistake 3. Letting the mix dry out completely. Containers dry far faster than open ground, and once the potting mix goes bone dry, it actually repels water and runs straight down the sides. The fix takes 30 seconds. A slow, deep soak until water runs out the bottom. That's it. Dodge those 3 and the rest is easy. You've just seen 12 vegetables, each with a specific scientific reason why a container beats open ground. But the top 3, that's where the peer-reviewed laboratory data gets genuinely surprising. Plant number 2. One 2023 study measured its lycopene, roughly doubling inside a restricted root zone. And plant number 1. It's a herb you almost certainly own right now, and you're almost certainly growing it the wrong way. Stay with me. Minor loop for plant number 3. Researchers used a container the size of a coffee cup, and the yield didn't drop. Number 3. Peppers. Here's the setup first, so you can copy it today. A 2 to 3 gallon container, dissolved nutrients with every watering, and never let the mix dry out completely. That's it. That's the whole method. Now here's why it works. A study published in Biomed Research International, indexed on PubMed PMC ID 7008264, grew pepper plants in containers as small as 250 milliliters. That's roughly the size of a coffee cup. Plant height dropped 21%. Stem diameter dropped 23%. Leaf area dropped 25%. But the total fruit yield, it held steady. How? It's a mechanism called photoassimilate partitioning. When the roots are boxed in, the plant can't push carbohydrates down into a big root system, so it redirects that energy into fruit instead. The leafy part shrinks, But the harvest index, the ratio of fruit to total plant, climbs. You're not really growing a pepper plant. You're running a fruit factory that forgot how to grow leaves. Number 2. Tomatoes. Here's the practical setup first. Give each plant a minimum 750 milliliters of pot. Use a perlite heavy mix and water frequently in small amounts every 2 to 4 hours on a hot day, if you can manage it. Now here's why that small pot works in your favor. A 2023 study published in Agronomy, a peer-reviewed journal from MDPI, measured what happens when tomato plants hit extreme root restriction. At just 8 centimeters of container height, the soluble sugar content in the fruit jumped by 69%. And one measurement showed lycopene, the compound that makes tomatoes red, roughly doubling. A companion study in Scientia Horticulae pinned down the mechanism, the genes responsible for sugar production: sucrose synthase, fructokinase, hexokinase, get directly activated by root restriction. The fruit comes out slightly smaller, about 14% lighter. But the sugars and the lycopene concentrate inside that smaller fruit. Your container is basically nudging the plant to pump fructose and glucose into every cherry tomato as a survival response. Number 1. Mint. And the number 1 plant on this list? Mint. Not because mint grows better in a container, but because mint in the ground is a biological invasion that most gardeners never fully recover from. Mint spreads through rhizomes, underground root runners that move outward in every direction. These rhizomes push through thin plastic drainage holes and root directly into the soil below. They regenerate from fragments as small as 2 to 3 millimeters. Once mint enters your garden, it is extremely difficult to remove completely. The container is the only real solution. But here is what most videos never tell you. This is called the impervious surface rule, documented by the Solano County Master Gardeners through UCANR. A container sitting on soil or grass is not enough. The rhizomes exit through the drainage holes and enter the ground directly beneath the pot. The only way a container fully contains mint is if it sits on an impervious surface, concrete brick or pavers. Not soil, not mulch, not grass. 3 steps. 1. Use a hard plastic or ceramic pot with drainage holes. 2. Place it on concrete brick or pavers, never on soil. 3. Check the surface around the pot every 2 weeks and cut any above-ground runners immediately. The number 1 reason mint belongs in a container isn't about growing it better. It's about protecting everything else in your garden from biological takeover. Pet warning. The ASPCA lists mint as toxic to dogs and cats. Its essential oils cause gastrointestinal irritation. Keep it out of reach. So here's what these 15 plants teach us. A container isn't just a solution for small spaces. It's a control panel for 5 environmental variables that open soil can never give you: drainage temperature, root zone mobility, and invasion isolation. 15 plants, 5 mechanisms, 0 repeated reasons. And that number 1, mint. Not the sweetest harvest, not the most dramatic yield data, but the most important lesson. Sometimes a container isn't about growing better. It's about protecting everything else you've already planted. Pick one plant from this list. Get one pot this weekend. And drop a comment below. Tell me which plant surprised you most and which one you're starting with. I read every single comment because your container does the controlling for you. Less digging, more harvesting. That's the lazy gardener's way. Happy gardening!